There's just some certain aspects about anime that you can't get anywhere else. Tentacles, cat girls, lolis, isekai, and yes, the most important one out of all of them, Wencest. There are so many titles out there, including My Sister, My Rider, Orimo. Recently, My Sister's Unusual. There are so many shows. You can't have a harem show without some sort of brocon or siscon element added into it. And My Stepmom's Daughter is My Ex is no exception to that. A show introducing the idea of two people that are now siblings that have a little bit of a romantic struggle they're dealing with. But interestingly enough, as I kept with this series, knowing full well what it was going for, I was pleasantly surprised by the destination it eventually got to. But this is my review of My Stepmom's Daughter is My Ex, a 12-episode series that aired in the summer 2022 anime season, so let's jump right into it. The story behind My Stepmom's Daughter is My Ex, you pretty much get it from the title, essentially is Mizuto and Yume, who once were actually boyfriend-girlfriend when they were in middle school. Now, they had a little bit of a falling out back then, they broke up, but some couple years later, they find themselves sitting in front of each other at a table as their parents are talking about marrying each other. In order to make their parents happy with their new relationship, the two of them decide between each other they're going to keep it a secret that they were once together. And so you have this whole struggle with the two of them now living together and seeing a different side of each other and struggling with those feelings of romance while at the same time obviously arguing about different things like who is the big brother or big sister. And this gets even more complicated as they find they're going to the same school, and now everybody knows they're siblings. And while the two of them seem like they want to push each other away as they have a relationship with other people, you start to see that jealousy start to rear its head. Now, my thoughts on My Stepmom's Daughter is My Ex. Starting out, this show was kind of your typical brocon siscon thing here. A little bit of a tsundere from both directions as they create competitions against each other on which one would slip up and make it seem like they're not siblings, and having little punishment games to go alongside of it. Additionally, having this little aspect that Yumi herself is trying to change her appearance. She was a bookworm in her previous school, and now she wants to be a little more attractive and get out there and meet people more. On the opposite end, Mizuto almost seems like he wants to keep the norm. He's always kind of been a bookworm, he's always kept his face in a book at all times, but you also have a lot of people trying to use Mizuto to get to Yume. But from either direction, over time, what you'll get a sense of is that the two of them haven't really given up on each other. You'll get the sense in the backstory that the two of them were pretty obsessive with each other, especially Yume. And that's sort of a feeling that has never really left them. Despite the fact they're trying to act like siblings, Yume is very protective of Mizuto. Every time that Mizuto would try to act like his original self, it would completely throw off Yume. This charming side that she always loved, and misses, honestly. Eventually we meet Minami, who is this girl that's really obsessed with Yume, to the point that she's willing to marry Mizuto in order to be with Yume for the rest of her life because they're siblings, and I don't know why, but apparently if you marry somebody, you're with their siblings for the rest of your life. And later on, we meet Higashira, who is a friend of Mizuto, who the two of them enjoy reading books together, and you have this little moment where everybody's trying to get her to get with Mizuto. So my thoughts on My Stepmom Daughter is My Ex. This is honestly a series that has its peaks and its lulls. When the show kind of gets stuck in the weeds with the whole brocon siscon thing, I think that's when it's at its weakest. Early on, the show really felt like it was so stuck on the idea of these two being very immature about their new relationship, constantly bickering back and forth, and a lot of the dialogue and the exchanges and things that are happening just didn't really work. But honestly, as things went along, we got into the whole thing with Higashira and her relationship with Mizuto that I really felt like things started picking up. I really liked Higashira. I think she was like really goofy. She was a little bit clumsy, a little bit too open about herself. And honestly, I felt really wrong when you had these other two girls that were really trying to push her into Mizuto's lap. Almost felt like she was being manipulated in an almost really nasty way. But at the same time, I was always struggling because it felt like Yume's involvement with that whole situation didn't make sense to me. Yume's obsessed with Mizuto. Why would she help somebody else get with Mizuto? But despite that, I loved Higashira. Her chemistry with Mizuto was absolutely fantastic. I ship Higashira. She was easily the best part of this show. Just give me those episodes with Higashira and I loved it. The chemistry was perfect. The character interactions were perfect. The comedy was perfect. But then the show kind of brings the reins back a little bit and it starts to get into the history of Mizuto and Yume. Honestly, it was boring. And I think for a purpose. It was trying to paint this picture of puppy love. The idea of two people not understanding love, but yet coming to each other. And just like puppy love and just like adolescence, they don't understand each other and they thus jump to conclusions which ultimately breaks their relationship. And I felt like building an entire story based on that puppy love felt weird. I mean, Mizuto himself puts it perfectly at some point. You were just the one that showed up. So from a perspective of romance itself, it doesn't make much sense. But despite my stumbling there, I think it ended up turning into something really fantastic later on as we get these characters finally realize there's something more to each other than what they had when they were in a relationship. From Yume's perspective, changing from seeing Mizuto as her dream boyfriend into him being a person, seeing him from multiple dimensions rather than a two-dimensional view. So in the end, I think the writer had something really good here that they wanted to explore, despite it being in the realm of a bro-con-cis-con story. Early on, I was kind of shocked by the overall concept of this story. Typically, with most of these types of stories, you have a character who's been living with somebody else for most of their life. It's the whole idea of 10 years ago, mom showed up with this girl, and we've been living with each other for 10 years, and now suddenly doki dokis. It's a little more creepy. This one, it's harder for me to swallow, just because these are technically kids that are now in high school that have had a relationship before that have never seen each other as siblings. Now they have to force themselves to see themselves as siblings. It makes the dynamic a little more difficult to really deal with. Can they really ever technically see each other as siblings, or will they always see each other as what they've spent more time as, which is in a relationship? I think my only problem that I had with this series overall is that I felt like it was a little bit too much too late. For a majority of the show, it's very difficult to understand Mizuto. He's just sort of just a stern face with no emotion. At the same time, I was frustrated with Yume, and the idea that she was super obsessed with Mizuto, and I couldn't understand why. But like I said, it's too much too late, and this idea that it takes until the very end of the story before you finally understand the two characters. Correction, you understand Mizuto, but you see Yume in a different light because she changes how she sees things. She changes how she views Mizuto. She's kind of creepy at first, honestly. She's super creepy. So I sort of kind of split the series into 3 arcs. The beginning, which is the typical bro-con-cis-con thing, which I thought was an absolute shrug. That middle section, which was just goofy fun and kind of heartbreaking stuff with Higashira. And then this later arc, which is again, where you finally start to see Yume's developing, you see that Mizuto's character is more than just a blank character, and everything starts to really build up at the end point. And the way that they pulled that off, despite it being in the realm of the forbidden love, the relationship between 2 siblings, just because it's from the perspective of once relationship, now siblings, was interesting. But I think a lot of people's enjoyment is really going to ride heavy on the idea if they're willing to sit through all this fluff before they get to the romantic punchline. I can make an argument that it feels like it's a tonal shift jumbled mess at times, going from goofy to serious to fetishizing to heartbreaking at the same time. But if any of that sounds interesting to you, I definitely suggest checking out the series. But that's my review of My Stepmom's Daughter Is My Ex. If you like this video, I'd appreciate if you hit that like button down below, comment, let me know what you thought of the series. You're going to be checking it out. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you get all my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you like my content and you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon link, a tips link, and a super thanks button down below. I greatly appreciate everybody that considers, and y'all take care.